So welcome to our first webinar from STEM Success. This one is on supporting pupil transition, and it's the first in a whole series which we hope to be hosting both this term and next year. This presentation is brought to you by myself, who being a teacher with the outreach team, and Alex Stainton, teacher with the outreach team. It's a practical session. It's aimed to be interactive, so you can see that there's a chat box down in the left-hand corner of your screen. Please feel free to ask us anything, or if we haven't made something clear, just type in that box and then we will answer your questions as we work through the presentation. I should also say that this webinar is being recorded, so that it will eventually be placed on the website where you can access it again. And oh yeah, one last thing, just be aware that when you are typing in your questions, other people can see what you're writing, so just be careful about not naming individual pupils. Okay then, let's begin.
Okay, so these are our aims for the presentation, for the webinar. We're thinking about transition to ensure that our pupils are prepared as well as they can be so they can achieve successful transitions. Promoting successful experiences over time contributes to good self-esteem for our children with SEND. We're going to be looking at a range of potential strategies so that we can select those that are most appropriate for the pupils that we support. And we have to carry out our statutory duty in accordance with the Code of Practice when working with pupils with special needs and transition. Hopefully we will be showing you things aimed really for all age groups, or can be adapted for all age groups. And ideally, give you some ideas so that those pupils who need it may have something to take away with them by the end of the summer term to prepare them for transition in September. So why are transitions more difficult for pupils with SEND? As you can see from the slide, there are a lot of differences, a lot of needs they may have, which would make transition quite difficult. This list is not exhaustive, obviously. They may well struggle with verbal information and they may miss key points, so preparing them for changes is very important. They may take longer to adjust to new situations, to learn new rules and expectations, so the more that we can do around supporting that, the better. They may not have very strong planning and organising skills themselves, so we need to help them with this. Whenever they are faced with a lack of consistency or a change to routine, they may be confused and they may be anxious, so again, putting in supports around this will help them. Their social skills may often be affected and they can be left feeling isolated, left out, and we need to help support them with changes into new situations. They may not have a very good concept of time. They won't necessarily know when certain things are going to happen, when changes will happen, and they won't be able to prepare themselves for them unless we can support them with them.
So, Wave 1 teaching is about what should be on offer for all children. And the best approach to transition preparation is really to have a really good programme of support in place for everybody, all the pupils at the school. And there's lots of different ways you can do this. We've listed some on this slide. Assemblies are really helpful to revisit the topic of change, growing up, moving on, challenges ahead of you. All of those subjects can be tackled within assemblies, whole school, year group assemblies, and even class assemblies. Transition days are key, really. There should be an identified day at the end of, towards the end of the summer term, where the normal timetable is collapsed and all children have the opportunity to spend a day in their new classroom or at their new school if they're moving up to a different setting, or coming into the setting if they are early years, coming from an early years setting up into reception at the school. So that's crucial, but it can only happen, of course, if class groups are organised in time. So that's another thing we really want to emphasise in this training today. You do need to build in time to do transition properly, and that will be part of the planning process. Another way that you can help all pupils manage change and transition is through your PSHE curriculum. In Key Stage 2, there's a strand called Developing Confidence and Responsibility and Making the Most of Your Abilities, which focuses on change, growing up, moving on, and facing new challenges positively. That naturally leads on to activities, whole class activities that you can do with everybody, and so you're meeting the needs of your children with special needs in whole class activities. We have an example of a worksheet, which we're going to show now, which has been taken from primaryresources.com, where you can find it. It's freely downloadable, and it's just a really nice example of a worksheet that Year 2 children could do in preparation for moving up to Year 3, infants to juniors. And the reason why we've chosen this one really is because there is the box in the middle about questions and worries. And so you might know in advance from actually listening to the pupil's voice the kinds of things that they may be worried about. And once you know that, you can put something in place to help them manage it. There's also a box called, which says in Year 3, I would like help with. So that would be quite useful also for the child to fill in, so you know in advance the kinds of things that they've identified that they may need a little bit of extra support with. So that's one good way that you can think about improving transition for all children. We have another example as well, which comes from, sorry, this one's not visual. This is just me explaining and telling you about something.
Geraldine's just asked a question about this.
Okay.
She likes this worksheet. Have there any examples of ones that have been filled in?
At this stage, Geraldine, we don't unfortunately have any examples of completed worksheets, but as we go on our visits, that will definitely be something that we hope to collect for future training. I think that's a really good idea. But the other thing I just wanted to mention at this point is whole class activities like problem solving and role plays around potential scenarios that a child, and I'm thinking really in particular children moving on to secondary school, so those people in Year 6, may face, may have worries about things they can do in advance to help them work out the best possible plan of action if they do struggle and get into difficulties. And there are some resources from Twinkle, which you do have to subscribe to, but I'll read a couple of examples. They're quite easy to create yourself. You'll see when I read one. There's an example here about, it's a scenario about you're following your new timetable, but you keep getting lost, moving from one lesson to another. Everyone else in the class is ready for their lesson. What can you do? And the questions that the children can role play and problem solve are, how might you feel? Have you ever been lost before? What could you do in this situation? Who could you ask for help? That's just a really a nice creative idea of helping prepare children so that they feel confident and comfortable that they will know what to do if there is a problem. The Twinkle web address,
I think it's twinkle.co.uk.
I think so as well, but if you Google it, you'll be able to find it that way, Anne. Thank you. So that the example given through Twinkle, though, is a 2-page document of sort of like, well, no more than that, 3 pages of about 20 different scenarios. So it is quite a useful document to get your hands on.
Thank you, Chris, for putting in the address
there. Oh,
yes,
yeah, fantastic. So the web address has just come up. So moving on to the next slide, this one is all about planning. So for those children that you know in advance you will need to do something additional to help them with transition, you really need to start thinking about how you're going to help them, how you're going to support them through transition at an early stage. And the key transitions, ones from early year settings into primary, primary into secondary, secondary into post-16, you really need to start talking to parents, talking to the children early. And we suggest sort of Year 5 for children at primary and Year 9, Year 10 for children in secondary school. You will need to involve parents, that's really important, and the pupil as well. And there's lots and lots of material available for ways that you can collect pupil voices, forms you can use via if you have a look at the Waltham Forest website, and do a search on that website for pupil-centred planning, and you will find a whole range of resources that you can use for children of different ages and different ability levels. So there's ones with symbols if pupils can't read text. All sorts of really great resources are available at that website, which we will put up for you as well. Maybe, I think Chris has already done that. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
That was fantastic. So planning is really crucial. You need to share information as well with other, once you know the school the children are going to, you need to start involving somebody from that setting, invite them to meetings in year 6, and make a plan of all the things that you can do to help facilitate a positive transition for those individuals that need something different from or additional to other children. We have a couple of examples here to show you. One is from the Autism Education Trust. So this one you would use. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
I'll just see if I can.
We're going to look at that one first, I think. So any children that you have in with autism,
Sorry.
This would be a really useful document to have a look at. It's freely available from the web if you go to the Autism Education Trust. It's called the Transition Toolkit, and we've taken this sheet from the toolkit just to show you today. Not sure you were able to see implement to help a child successfully achieve transition to their next setting.
Okay, not quite sure.
A little bit of technical difficulty here.
Close this time. Okay.
Can we go back to the presentation? Oh, this looks good. We're back on track.
Sorry about that. I don't know what you can see, but apologies. It's our first time doing it.
So the second document that we've got to show you on planning comes from the Foundation for People with Learning Difficulties, who have provided 3 amazing documents, which we are going to talk about later. There's a whole slide on them. But this map, this planning map, has been taken from their Tips for Busy Teachers, it's called. And it's a whole schedule of how you can plan transition from year 5 all the way through, actually, through year 6 into year 7. And it's colour coded rather, so that the red is what the primary setting does, the primary Senko. The blue, I think that the secondary Senko would have responsibility for, and the purple are joint initiatives. So that's something we haven't really got time to look at it in depth here, but you will be able to find it yourself online, and we'll give you information about that later on.
Okay, so as Jo was saying, the Code of Practice tells us we must make provision, which is different from or additional to that for other pupils which we would provide for in our Wave 1 teaching. So what sort of additional things can we do? What can we do to make transition easier for pupils with SEND? Additional visits to new settings are really important. Obviously, plan for the children to do their ordinary visits with everybody else, but they will need more than that to give them time to get used to where they're going, to new members of staff. And this isn't just transition from primary to secondary or nursery to reception. This would be between classes. Perhaps they may well need extra support in terms of additional visits. They may be highly anxious about all of these things that are going on. So the strategies we're talking about will help them manage this anxiety. They're doing things like circle time to talk about their worries and their feelings, researching the new setting, so find out as much information as you can about the new place or help them to do this. Role play different scenarios that might happen. There are some settings, some secondary schools that may run a summer school before students start in Year 7 in September. So do find out if your child's new setting is going to do that and how you access it. There are lots of resources you can use, approaches you can use to talk about transition with your children, and one of the best ones is social stories. That will really help them prepare for what may happen and look at anxieties and things they may be worried about to do with this change. Obviously, it's very important that settings share information between each other, and that classes do and teachers do if it's transition between year groups. A key person, hopefully, should be identified that can assist with the transition and can help with any worries along the way. A key person in both settings if they're transitioning between each setting, so that when they get to the new setting, they know there's somebody that actually they can go to if they're concerned about anything, and that the key person from the first setting can pass on all the relevant information. One of the ways that you can really support a child with this transition is to make a transition book. So you've got a practical thing for them to work through, help to make and actually have in order to prepare them for this change after summer holidays. And obviously it's really important to involve the child in making this. And they can do a lot of research about their new school, perhaps, or their new class. They can look at the internet to find out some information. You could get a school brochure so that they can find out about their new school if they're moving settings. It's always a good idea when you are doing transition days or you're supporting with transition visits to a new class or a new school to have a camera available so that the child can decide, or the student can decide, what they actually want to take a photograph of, what's going to be important to them that they really want to remember about their new setting before they start in September. So you could read through this with them at school, and obviously along the way while you're doing that, other things may come up that they may need support with, they might be anxious about, therefore you find out some extra information for them, etc., etc. And send a copy home to read during the holidays with them. Now, dependent on the child, you might not want them necessarily to be looking at this all day, every day for 6 weeks. It might make them a little bit anxious, but obviously that depends on the child. It may be better to put it away and then get it out again near the end of the holidays. Obviously that's something to advise parents to do when it's near the time of transitioning. And obviously it needs to be appropriate for the child's level of understanding. Now, on our website, the address is on that slide, sendsuccess.org.uk. There are some examples of transition booklets that you can adapt for your own needs. There is an early years transition booklet, and there is a reception to year 1 transition booklet, which you can use. There is also a generic moving to next year's class in September booklet, which we have downloaded from, is it TES Resources?
Education Supplement. It's a free resource from TES.
It's this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's make that a little bit bigger. It's a very nice little document that you can obviously, I didn't want to make that 100. You can see, you can put a photograph, my name is, the class I'm in now is, my age, my school year, my teacher, and then I think we move on to looking at the new class. My school year will be, things that are going to remain the same is quite important, and then things that might be different is very important as well. And that may well come from the child. They may well have their own ideas about what was going to be different and what's going to stay the same. Yeah, so this is a very good resource which can come from TS Resources. Thank you for your suggestion, Anne, to visit the new school and take a video. That's very good. Or use a school video clip from the school website. Excellent. That's really good. Thank you. Let's go to here. And thank you for your comment, Margaret, as well. Glad it's useful.
So a little bit similar to transition books are social stories, and there is quite a lot of overlap actually. Social stories tend to be shorter and a bit more concise and focusing in on a particular social situation, which a child may find difficult. So therefore, new setting would be perfect. Transition booklets tend to be a little bit more interactive. The child has more input in actually producing them. There may be activities that the child does, taking photos, putting those in, finding information, writing that in. But social stories, as Alex said earlier, are a great way of helping give children the confidence that they can cope with a new, different situation that they may not have experienced before. And we have produced a couple of pro formas which you're more than welcome to use, which can be found on the website. And we're going to show these to you now.
Secondaries first.
One is for, again, it's a primary to secondary. We've called it a social narrative. And it's an A4 document, two sides. So when you fold it in half, you have a little booklet about the new school. And it is interactive. The child can fill in, if we go down, their name, their new school. They need to find out the name of the head of year, maybe even take photos, teachers, put those in, different teachers, form tutor, the time the school day starts. And I think this is the back page, which says at the end of July we finish school for the summer holidays. This is so important as well, because lots of the children we see don't understand time. They don't know when to expect the changes. So it says in 6-7 weeks, you can fill that in. I'll be starting my new school, and then it goes on to show them information about their new school. So that's one we've prepared for you, because as we said earlier, it's one of the reasons we're doing this webinar now is so that you can make sure the children that need something additional to other children can get that before they leave school at the end of this term. Time's dwindling away, so this is to sort of help you. They're editable, so you can change them and adapt them, and as I said, you can find them on our website.
Just to answer the question that you've asked, the PowerPoint, the whole webinar, yes, will be available on our website. It's being recorded, so once it's finished, we'll put it up on the website, and then you'll be able to access it. No problem. I'm going to try and use it slightly bigger, but every time I click, it makes it 100%. So I'll put it back to where it was.
Okay. Hopefully, people will have been able to see what that social story consists of. That's the first one, and then there's another one which can be found in the same place. Oh, sorry, you have gone to...
This is the infant one.
This is the infant one. So one is primary to secondary, and the other one is early years into reception. But you can change them however you choose. But they are there to be used, so please have a look at them. The thing about social stories is they need to be written specifically for that child. So be careful about the language you're using. It needs to match that child's level of understanding. Once they've got it, they need to go home with it. They need to keep it over the holiday. As Alex said earlier, maybe get it out towards the end of the holiday, start reading through, just so that they feel confident and secure that they're going to be able to know what to do once they get to their new school in September. The other example on the slide is of a social story about returning to school. It's called Back to School. It may be that it looks slightly too small on your screen to be able to read it. But this one we took from Pinterest, which has an abundance of social stories and other really useful resources for special needs. So do, when you have a moment, have a look at that. And the link below, which it will take you to it's actually a PowerPoint presentation that could be shown to a whole group of nursery school children, preparing them for transition to their first school. We've saved it as a PDF. We can show it to you as part of the webinar, but you have the link on that slide if you wanted to use it as a presentation. Again, it would be really great for a teacher to make one of these purposefully for their own intention to prepare their children. It's very useful. It covers all the things, the little things that you might not think about, like doors, where to hang your coat, where you eat your lunch, where you're going to sit, what the toys are like in the classroom, circle time corner, where you have snacks, and there even is a picture of the toilet somewhere. So it's just a really nice example. You can make your own very easily, and the people that will be with you. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that could be done, which would really help prepare children well for a successful transition. So moving on to our next slide, it covers transition booklets again, social stories. Anything visual is really going to be helpful, including a timetable. That will be new to the primary school children, unless their primary schools have introduced them, which some primary schools do this towards the latter half of the summer term. They will give their children a timetable in preparation for having to use one at secondary. That's an example of really fantastic practice. If your school doesn't do that, when you go on the visits to the secondary school, make sure you get a copy of the timetable, have a look at it. For children with autism, though, you're going to have to be very clear that this isn't their timetable. It's not going to correspond to their particular lessons in September. It's just an example of that format and how it would be a good way of teaching them how to read it so that they feel comfortable. They get lost, they've got their timetable on them, they know how to find out where they need to go, which leads me on to the next point, which is a map. Many secondary schools are huge, often on 2 or 3 sites, so which is quite intimidating. So if you can pick up a map as well, the child could visit the school with the map, maybe find different areas using their map, just to help them get used to that new, different environment. Checklists are very good as well, going back to organisation. You have to be so much more responsible at secondary than you ever were at primary. So Anne, I can just see you've asked us something about routes on that. Yeah, that's really a good point to make as well. How you're going to get to your new school could be a massive worry for a lot of children. So to actually have a look on a map or Google Map, to put in your home and your school destination and to see it visually, to walk it a few times, all of that kind of thing would be great preparation. Checklists, as I was saying, there are some available on Twinkle. You could produce your own, just showing you what you will need to take with you each day. So your pencil case, your what else might you need? Your books for all the subjects that you've got that day, your PE kit if it's PE, your stuff for food technology if you're doing that. So there's so much that you need to remember that a checklist can be a really helpful way of helping a child achieve independence in that area. Calendars, crucial really, because the holiday is a long time. As a child, it just seemed to go on forever and ever. You weren't aware how many weeks it was. Children with learning difficulties often have a very poor concept of time. So if you showed them, if their parents had a calendar in the house, and this could be something that you would talk about during the transition planning, so that you're working with the parents, they could buy a calendar, have it in the house, cross off the days, have it marked very clearly when the first day of school is, so that children can see the days passing and know when they're going to start at their new setting. For younger children, it could be number of sleeps, of course. You could do it that way, perhaps counting down from 1 week before they start at their school. Diaries also very important. It's something that secondary school people need to get used to. That could be introduced in year 6 or during the holidays by parents. And we've put down here back to our own website, the Send Success website, which has some information, additional information on using visual supports and visual cues.
So we just wanted to show you this one resource that we found, which is excellent, from the Foundation for People with Learning Difficulties. If you can, I think it's that one there. And it's not top tips.
That's it.
For moving on to secondary school pupils and parents and staff.
This is the same place we got the planning map from earlier on, which was quite complex, from year 5 into year 7, which is part of one of these booklets that we're showing.
So as I said, it's for pupils, and then there's a separate one for
busy teachers. And there's another one which we haven't got to show you today, but there is another one for parents as well.
Yeah.
So again, during the year 5, when you're beginning to think in the annual review meeting or the person-presented review meeting, to think about transitioning and secondary placements, these would be really useful documents to look at, to give out at that point.
Absolutely. And it has been devised with the help of children and young people with learning disabilities, in terms of what they thought would be useful, what was useful for them. It follows a very clear pathway. You could make it into individual targets for the pupil, because it's very, very clear. So again, the link that is on this slide here. That's the one, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. And it's from the Foundation for People with Learning Difficulties. That's definitely the right link, yeah. Can include all links on that. Okay, the one for, so it's the Foundation for...
It's called the Foundation
People
for
with Learning
Difficulties.
So this is the link here.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it is, but it is.
So we can do an extra slide or some links from our website when we put the webinar on for all the links, and yes, I think we can do that at the end so that it's clear for people to access all these resources. If that's what you meant, I think it's what you meant.
We can't look inside those booklets, can we? Is it just the front cover?
No, it's just the front cover.
I'm just mentioning that because inside the one that's moving on, top tips for pupils moving on to secondary school, there is actually a very nice checklist in that booklet, which is to do when you're at primary school. Get a map of the new school with a visual of a map and then a box to tick. All the different things that you can do. Start using a diary or notebook at school. Write down questions you want to ask about your new school. Talk to your friends. Who else do you know who's moving to the same school? Visit the new school and take pictures to remind yourself of what it looks like. Practice buying food and drinks in cafes. Those are the summer holidays. Think about joining a club outside of school. You know, lots and lots of really great practical steps that people could do to help prepare them for that big transition. So we thoroughly recommend this resource. It's brilliant.
Definitely. So obviously we've talked about support before the change actually happens, but support during the change is really going to be vital. I mean, obviously we've talked about things that will help them beforehand, you know, getting used to using a timetable. Well, actually, when they are there in the new setting, they will need support to use that timetable for their actual lessons when they're happening. Having a key person is really vital, I think, at this point. Somebody that they can go to if they're anxious about something, and somebody who can support them with all of these things. They may well need some sort of transitional object which makes them feel more comfortable. For a younger child, this may be a soft toy or something like that. For an older child, it could just be something that they like, that they want to keep in their kit, that might make them feel safer and more comfortable. They may need some visual supports. We've talked about already, just helping them with this transition, especially to secondary school. Communication between family and school is vital. You know, with any transition, how are they settling in? What's happening? You know, keeping that communication going so that any issues that come up can be dealt with, and that if the families are concerned about anything, that they can feed that back to school as well. And obviously, for the child with additional needs, coping with change and adapting to a new routine is really, really quite massive. So they should be given praise and praise for coping with this and dealing well with it.
The next slide is really about what the new school, the new setting needs to do before the start of the new term. There is a legal requirement to make reasonable adjustments for children that need that. You may need to arrange specific staff training before a child begins, which is why, of course, the preparation and the planning is so crucial. This all takes time. You need to know the pupils coming up to your setting, know the needs so that you can address them. You need to be able to assess, identify and focus on the pupil's skill and areas where support is needed, and ensure all staff are aware of the pupil's needs. Pupil profiles are great for that. Obviously, it's so much harder in a massive secondary school than it is in a smaller primary setting. So your school will need to have something in place so that all staff teaching that pupil are aware of their needs. And obviously, you'll need to monitor progress, and not just academic progress, but transitional progress as well. For those children that have the transition plan, that should also have included, well, when they start at the new school, things in place to help them. Do monitor that and make sure that the children are coping. As we said before, praise them for, managing this massive stage in their life. So if we move on to the next
and
slide.
I think that can also inform your planning for other children in the future.
Exactly.
If you can have some sort of feedback about what's worked or what's not worked, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, that can help with future planning, future support.
And so we've got to the end of our webinar. This is the last slide, which has some very helpful websites for you to refer to. The first one is the NASON mini booklet, which is really lovely because it's very short, but it does what it says on the tin, really. It's got really helpful advice for all age groups, early years, primary, secondary, post-16. Just a great little document which you can find and download at that website. The second one that we've put on the slide is the Autism Trust website, which is where you can download the Autism Transition Toolkit. So if you do have children with autism, do have a look at this because it's full of, really great advice and some resources as well, like the transition plan, which we showed you earlier. And lastly, we have put a link to the Down Syndrome Association for those of you that may be supporting a child with Down through transition. Again, it covers all areas and it's quite a thorough document. So
this is just one example of something from it, but there's lots and lots of other useful resources.
Very, very thorough document, and if you do have children with Down, make sure you have a look at that. So we thank you very much for joining us today for this, our first webinar. Hope you've enjoyed it. You will be able to find the webinar, as we said earlier, on our website. We've recorded this one so that you can access it at a later date if you want to, or signpost others to it. This is the first of many webinars, we hope. There will be more following on in September. So once again, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.